The call came in at exactly 2:17 a.m., slicing through the quiet hum of the police communication room like a knife through paper. The night shift was always slow, filled with tired eyes, lukewarm coffee, and the soft tapping of keyboards. Outside, the city slept under a thin layer of fog, streetlights glowing like distant stars. Inside the station, the phone rang, sharp and sudden, demanding attention. The dispatcher on duty, a young man named Ryan Cole, sighed and reached for the receiver. Calls at that hour were usually the same. Drunk arguments, noise complaints, confused voices that barely knew where they were. He expected nothing different as he pressed the phone to his ear and spoke his standard greeting. The voice on the other end was calm. Too calm. "There's a dead man in Riverside Park," the caller said. "Near the north entrance. You should send someone soon." Ryan blinked. He waited for laughter, for heavy breathing, for some sign that this was a prank. None came. The voice was steady, clear, and oddly polite. "Say, can you repeat that?" Ryan asked, sitting up straighter in his chair. The line went silent. Then, with a soft click, the call ended. Ryan stayed at the phone for a long moment. His heart began to beat a little faster. He replayed the words in his head. The tone. The lack of emotion. Something about it felt wrong. Still, he had heard strange calls before. He logged it as a possible false report and passed the information to a patrol unit nearby, more out of procedure than belief. Rain began to fall as the officers arrived at Riverside Park. The park was empty at night, a wide stretch of dark paths and swaying trees. The streetlights flickered weakly, their light broken by leaves and shadows. Near the north entrance, beneath one of those lights, they found the body. The man lay on his back, eyes open, staring at nothing. His clothes were neat, almost carefully arranged. There was a single stab wound in the center of his chest. No signs of a struggle. No blood splatter beyond what was necessary. It was clean. Too clean. The officers exchanged uneasy looks. Back at the station, Ryan felt a chill run down his spine when the confirmation came through. The call had been real. Someone had known. Someone had called. Detectives arrived and took over. Photos were taken. Measurements were made. The body was tagged and transported. The victim had no identification. No wallet. No phone. His face didn't appear in any immediate database searches. He was a ghost. By morning, the case was already labeled difficult. No witnesses had seen anything. Nearby cameras were either broken or pointed in the wrong direction. The rain had washed away whatever footprints might have been there. Still, the strangest detail remained the phone call. Detectives discussed it briefly, then moved on. Someone could have stumbled across the body and panicked. Not everyone trusted the police enough to stay on the line. It happened before. The call was noted, filed away, and slowly pushed aside by the weight of other cases. 3 days passed. The city returned to its normal rhythm. People walked their dogs through Riverside Park again. Joggers passed the spot where the man had died without ever knowing. The news mentioned the murder once, then forgot it. At 2:17 a.m. on the fourth night, the phone rang again. Ryan was not on duty this time. The dispatcher was an older woman named Karen Blake, someone who had worked the job long enough to recognize trouble the moment it spoke. "There's another one," the voice said. "This time, check the old bus terminal on 5th Street. Karen felt her stomach tighten. "Sir, who is this?" she asked quickly. The caller did not answer. The line went dead. Karen immediately alerted her supervisor. This time, there was no delay. Patrol cars were sent out within minutes. The old bus terminal had been closed for years, its windows boarded up, its halls filled with dust and echoes. Inside a cracked restroom, officers found the body of a woman. She was slumped against the wall, her head tilted slightly to one side, as if she had fallen asleep sitting up. Like the first victim, she had been stabbed once in the chest. No struggle. No chaos. Just silence. The similarity was impossible to ignore. Same time. Same type of wound. Same kind of coal. Back at the station, the mood shifted. Jokes disappeared. Conversations dropped to whispers. Detectives gathered in small groups, replaying the calls again and again. The recordings revealed no background noise. No traffic. No wind. Just the voice. Calm. Controlled. Almost gentle. The killer, whoever he was, wanted the police to find the bodies. He wanted them to know. Detective Laura Mitchell was called in early that morning. She was known for her patience and her attention to detail. She listened to the recordings without speaking, her face unreadable. When they finished, she leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. "He's not afraid," she said quietly. "That's the problem." The first two victims had nothing in common that anyone could see. Different ages, different backgrounds, different locations. Yet the killer treated them the same way. Like items on a list. As the sun rose, news of the second body spread quickly. Reporters gathered outside the station. Cameras flashed. Questions filled the air. Is this a serial killer? Did the police ignore the first warning? Is the city safe? Inside, the police scrambled for answers they didn't have. Later that night, Detective Mitchell visited Riverside Park alone. She stood under the same broken streetlight, listening to the wind move through the trees. She tried to imagine the killer standing there, phone in hand, watching the police arrive. Did he hide nearby? Did he leave immediately? Or did he blend into the darkness, already gone before the call was even made? Something about the timing bothered her. The calls were too precise, too perfectly placed between the act and the discovery. This wasn't panic. It was planning. As Mitchell turned to leave, her phone vibrated with a message from the station. Another call had come in. Not reporting a body. Just 3 words. "You're listening now." And for the first time since the murders began, Detective Laura Mitchell felt truly afraid. After the second body was discovered, the city changed its behavior without anyone officially telling it to. Streets emptied earlier. Bars closed faster. People checked over their shoulders while waiting for buses or unlocking their doors. Fear spread quietly, moving faster than the news ever could. Everyone felt it, even if they didn't yet understand why. Inside the police department, fear turned into pressure. Detective Laura Mitchell barely slept. The words from the final message echoed in her mind again and again. "You're listening now." It was not a threat. It was a statement. Whoever made that call knew exactly how much attention he had gained. He knew he was no longer being dismissed as a strange coincidence. The investigation team gathered in the main conference room the next morning. Whiteboards were filled with timelines, maps, and grainy photos from the crime scenes. 2 bodies, 2 locations, 2 identical wounds, and 2 calls, both placed at exactly 2:17 a.m. Mitchell stood near the board, arms crossed, studying the details. She asked the question no one else wanted to say out loud. What if the calls are the point? The room fell quiet. Some detectives argued that the killer was just seeking attention, like so many before him. Others believed the calls were meant to confuse the police or taunt them. But Mitchell saw something different. The killer was not bragging. He was not panicking. He was guiding. "He wants us there quickly," she said. "Before the bodies are disturbed. Before someone else finds them." That idea made the room uneasy. A killer who cared about how the scene looked was far more dangerous than one who didn't. Phone records were pulled immediately. The technical team worked through the night, tracing signals, examining towers, searching for patterns. But every time, the trail went cold. The calls came from different locations, different phones. Each one was used only once and then disappeared. It was clean. Too clean. Then the third call came. Once again, it was 2:17 a.m. This time, the voice sounded exactly the same, but the location was different. A public library that closed at sunset. Officers arrived to find a man dead between the bookshelves. He had been stabbed once, placed carefully on the floor as if someone had taken time to make him comfortable. No struggle. No witnesses. No evidence. The city panicked. News channels ran the story non-stop. Social media exploded with theories and speculation. People shared clips of the recorded calls, analyzing every breath and pause. Some slowed down the audio, claiming to hear hidden messages. Others tried to guess the killer's age, education, and background based on the way he spoke. That was when the nickname appeared. Someone online called him the Caller. The name stuck. With every new murder, the pressure on the police grew heavier. The mayor demanded results. The public demanded safety. And the killer continued to stay one step ahead. Detective Mitchell noticed something strange as the cases piled up. The locations were public, but the victims were always alone. The killer knew exactly when those spaces would be empty. He understood the city's rhythm better than most people. She began to look deeper into the victims' pasts. That's when the pattern revealed itself. The first victim had been reported missing 2 years earlier. The case had gone cold within weeks. The second victim had vanished after leaving work late one night. Her family had begged for updates, but eventually, the search faded away. The third victim had been homeless, reported missing by a volunteer group, then forgotten. All of them had files. All of them had names. And all of them had been abandoned by the system. Mitchell brought this discovery to the team. At first, they didn't want to believe it. Serial killers often created false patterns. But the more they looked, the clearer it became. Every victim had once been a missing person. Every case had been quietly closed. The killer wasn't choosing randomly. He was choosing failures. The next call confirmed it. This time, after giving the location, the caller stayed on the line longer than usual. "I see you're looking back now," he said calmly. "It took you long enough." The dispatcher froze, unsure whether to speak. The line remained open. "You write reports," the caller continued. "You close files. You move on. But they don't." The call ended before anyone could respond. The body was found minutes later. Another missing person. Another forgotten name. Public opinion shifted overnight. Some people still saw the caller as a monster. Others began to speak differently. They asked uncomfortable questions. Why had these cases been ignored? Why had no one been held responsible? Online debates turned heated. Families of missing people came forward, sharing their stories. The city was forced to look at its own reflection, and it did not like what it saw. Inside the police department, the mood grew tense. Some officers felt attacked. Others felt ashamed. A few felt both. Mitchell felt something else entirely. She felt watched. The killer knew too much. He knew about internal procedures. He knew which cases had been deprioritized and which had been quietly buried. That information wasn't easily available to the public. Late one night, Mitchell sat alone in her office, reviewing the call logs. She noticed something small but important. The caller never dialed emergency services. He always used the non-emergency police line. That detail stayed with her. Most people wouldn't even know that number existed, and those who did rarely used it at 2 in the morning to report a murder. It suggested familiarity, comfort, training. She requested employee records for anyone who had worked night shifts in police communications over the past 10 years. It was a long list, but it was a place to start. Before she could review it fully, another call came in. This one was different. After reporting the location, the caller spoke again, his voice steady as ever. "You're closer now," he said. "But you're still asking the wrong question." "What question?" the dispatcher asked without thinking. The caller paused, as if considering his answer. "Not who I am," he said. "Why I started." The line went dead. When police reached the location, they found something new. A piece of paper placed carefully beside the body. It wasn't messy. It wasn't rushed. It simply read, "You didn't protect them." The message spread faster than the murders themselves. Protesters gathered outside City Hall. Signs appeared. News anchors argued on live television. The police were no longer just chasing a killer. They were defending their own history. Mitchell stood in the crowd one afternoon, watching people shout and cry. She thought about the missing files, the families who had waited for phone calls that never came, the reports she herself had once skimmed over without knowing the full story behind them. For the first time, she understood the killer's power. He wasn't hiding. He was exposing. And as night fell, as the city grew quiet once more, Mitchell knew one thing with certainty. The caller wasn't done yet. He had more names. And he was ready to make sure none of them were forgotten again. The sixth call changed everything. Up until that night, the killer had followed his own strict rules. He called, delivered the location, and disappeared into silence. No conversation. No explanation. Just a calm voice and a dead body waiting to be found. The police had learned to expect it, even dread it, but they also relied on the pattern. The caller was predictable in his own disturbing way. That predictability ended at 2:17 a.m. on a cold Tuesday morning. The dispatcher who answered the phone was new, barely 6 months into the job. Her name was Elena Ruiz, and she still felt a small jolt of fear every time the phone rang late at night. When she heard the familiar calm voice, her mouth went dry. "There's a body near Harbor Walk," the man said, behind the closed ferry office. Elena's hands trembled as she typed. She waited for the click, for the silence that always followed. It didn't come. "I know you're recording this," the caller continued. The room froze. Supervisors turned in their chairs. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Every person within earshot leaned closer without realizing they were doing it. No one had ever heard him speak this long before. "I want you to listen carefully," the voice said. "Not just to me. To everything you've ignored." Elena swallowed. "Sir," she said softly, "can you tell me your name?" The caller gave a small breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "Names are what you erase first," he replied. "That's the problem." The line went dead. Police reached Harbor Walk in less than 7 minutes. The body was exactly where the caller said it would be. A middle-aged man, carefully placed against the wall, eyes closed. One stab wound to the chest. No signs of panic. No evidence of a fight. But there was something else this time. A folded paper rested on the man's chest. Detective Laura Mitchell arrived as the sun began to rise, painting the water with pale light. She put on gloves and unfolded the paper slowly, as if it might fall apart in her hands. It contained a single sentence. "I didn't choose them. You did." Mitchell felt a tightness in her chest she couldn't explain. She had chased killers before. She had seen cruelty, arrogance, rage. This felt different. This felt personal in a way that reached far beyond the victims themselves. Back at the station, the call recording was played again and again. The killer's voice was clear, controlled, and deliberate. There was no anger in it. No panic. Only certainty. "He wanted us to hear that," Mitchell said during the briefing. "He wanted witnesses." The investigation into the victims' pasts deepened. What at first looked like coincidence now became undeniable. The man from Harbor Walk had been reported missing 4 years earlier. His sister had called the police weekly for months. Eventually, the calls stopped. The file was marked inactive. The killer knew this. He knew every detail. As the days passed, the calls continued, but now they were different. After reporting the location, the caller sometimes stayed on the line for a few extra seconds. Sometimes he spoke. Sometimes he didn't. But the silence itself felt intentional, as if he was standing just out of sight, watching reactions unfold. During one call, he said, "You measure success by what you close. I measure it by what you forget." Another time, he whispered, "They learned how quiet the world can be." The media turned the story into a spectacle. News anchors debated whether the killer was trying to justify his actions. Social media split into two angry sides. One called him a monster who deserved no mercy. The other called him a mirror, forcing the city to confront its failures. Families of missing persons flooded police hotlines. Some begged for files to be reopened. Others demanded to know why their loved ones had never been searched for properly. The department was drowning in its own past. Mitchell worked late every night, surrounded by stacks of old files. Faces stared up at her from faded photographs. Smiles frozen in time. Lives paused mid-sentence. She wondered how many of them might have ended up like the victims if the caller had not intervened. That thought scared her more than she wanted to admit. The seventh call came on a night when the city was unusually quiet. Rain tapped against the station windows. The caller's voice sounded closer this time, as if he was speaking from just outside the building. "You're angry now," he said. "That's good. Anger means you care." The dispatcher tried to keep her voice steady. "Why are you doing this?" There was a pause. Not a technical pause. A human one. "Because I waited," the caller said. "And no one came." The line went dead before she could ask anything else. That sentence echoed through the department like a gunshot. Mitchell stood motionless as she listened to the recording. She felt the weight of it settle deep in her chest. This was no longer just about forgotten victims. This was about someone who had once trusted the system and been abandoned by it. The body from that call belonged to a young woman who had disappeared after reporting domestic abuse. Her case file showed missed follow-ups and unanswered voicemails. Mitchell recognized the pattern instantly. Neglect. Not malice. Not always. Just neglect. The next crime scene delivered the most unsettling message yet. This time, the killer left a small audio recorder beside the body. It contained a recording of a 911 call made years earlier. A frightened voice begged for help, gave an address, then went silent. The response time had been slow. By the time officers arrived, the caller was gone. That voice belonged to the victim now lying on the floor. The room where the body was found felt heavy, like the air itself was pressing down on everyone inside it. Officers avoided eye contact. Some turned away. Mitchell felt her hands shake as she shut off the recorder. "He's not just killing," she said quietly. "He's testifying." From that moment on, the caller controlled the narrative. Every new murder came with context. A reason. A reminder. He was building a story piece by piece, and the police were forced to follow along. Yet even as he exposed the past, he revealed nothing about himself. No name. No face. No mistakes. But Mitchell noticed something subtle. The caller spoke like someone trained to listen. He allowed silence to stretch without discomfort. He knew when to speak and when not to. He understood how dispatchers thought, how police reacted. During one call, he said, "You're taught to stay calm, to separate emotion from function. I learned that too." That sentence stayed with her. Mitchell began focusing less on what the caller said and more on how he said it. His phrasing was precise. His tone never shifted. Even when he spoke about death, his voice remained level. This wasn't performance. It was habit. Then came the call that confirmed her suspicion. After reporting the location, the caller said one final thing. "You should check your own records," he said. "Some of us never really left." When the body was found, the note beside it was short and handwritten. "You trained me to listen." Mitchell felt the ground shift beneath her. The killer was not an outsider looking in. He was something the system had created. As night fell and the city once again waited in uneasy silence, Mitchell sat alone in her office, staring at the board filled with names and dates. She realized the truth was far more dangerous than any single arrest. If the caller was right, then the problem wasn't just him. It was everything that had allowed him to exist. And somewhere in the darkness, the phone was waiting to ring again, carrying another calm voice, another forgotten name, and another reminder that the past was not as buried as everyone had hoped. The realization settled over Detective Laura Mitchell slowly, like a fog rolling in so quietly that it wasn't noticed until it became impossible to see through. The caller was not just someone who understood police work from the outside. He understood it from within. Every pause in his speech, every carefully chosen word, every moment of silence felt practiced, familiar, trained. Mitchell began where she always did when the noise grew too loud. She went back to the beginning. She replayed every call in order, alone in the evidence room late at night. The lights hummed softly above her as the recordings filled the empty space. She closed her eyes and listened, not as a detective chasing a killer, but as someone listening to a coworker speak. She noticed how the caller never rushed the dispatcher, never interrupted, never panicked when silence stretched on the line. He waited, confident that someone was listening. That kind of comfort didn't come from confidence alone. It came from experience. The phrase "you trained me to listen" replayed in her mind again and again. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't angry. It was factual, as if the caller was simply stating a truth he had accepted long ago. Mitchell requested employment records from police communications, emergency response, and administrative departments covering the last 15 years. The request raised eyebrows, but no one questioned her openly. By now, everyone sensed that the answers were buried somewhere uncomfortably close. Boxes arrived the next morning. Files filled with names, employee numbers, shift schedules, evaluations, and resignation letters. Mitchell spread them across a long table and began reading. Night shift workers stood out immediately. People who had spent years listening to fear, confusion, and desperation through a headset in the dark hours when the world was quiet and help felt far away. People who learned to remain calm no matter what they heard. She narrowed it down further. Anyone who had resigned suddenly. Anyone who left after a personal tragedy. Anyone whose departure didn't quite fit. That was when she found Evan Cross. His file was thin. Too thin for someone who had worked 6 years on night shifts. His evaluations were clean. Calm under pressure. Reliable. Professional. There were no complaints, no disciplinary actions. His resignation letter was short, polite, and vague. It cited personal reasons. But attached to the file was a note from a supervisor dated 5 years earlier. Employee requested extended leave following disappearance of immediate family member. Mitchell felt her pulse quicken. She pulled the missing persons report connected to the note. The name matched. Evan Cross's younger sister, Lily, 22 years old. Last seen leaving her apartment one evening. No witnesses. No signs of forced entry. Her phone was found days later near a bus stop. The case had gone cold within months. Mitchell sat back in her chair and exhaled slowly. The pieces were beginning to align in ways she didn't like. She visited Evan's last known address that same afternoon. The building manager remembered him immediately. Quiet. Polite. Paid rent on time. Kept to himself. After his sister vanished, he had stopped smiling altogether. Inside the apartment, the air felt stale, as if it hadn't been lived in for weeks. The furniture was minimal. A table. A chair. A mattress on the floor. But the walls told a different story. They were covered with notes, maps, and photographs. Missing persons flyers. Case numbers. Dates circled in red. Locations marked with careful precision. Each victim's name written neatly beneath their photo. This wasn't obsession. It was organization. Mitchell's chest tightened as she moved closer. In the center of the wall was Lily's photograph. It was larger than the others. Framed. Her smile was bright and unguarded, frozen in a moment before everything went wrong. Below it, written in careful handwriting, were 3 words. No one came. Mitchell stepped back, the weight of it pressing against her. She imagined Evan sitting alone in this room night after night, staring at that wall, listening to old recordings, replaying unanswered calls. She imagined the moment something inside him finally broke, not loudly, but quietly, the way pressure breaks glass. For the first time since the investigation began, Mitchell felt something dangerously close to sympathy. That feeling vanished when the phone rang again. It was 2:17 a.m. The caller's voice came through the speaker, as calm as ever. "You found the room," he said. Mitchell felt every muscle in her body tense. Evan, she said quietly, it doesn't have to end like this. There was a pause. A real one. Heavy and human. It already ended, he replied. You just didn't notice. The line went dead. Police moved quickly, but Evan was already gone. Surveillance footage showed him leaving the building hours earlier, wearing a jacket and carrying a small bag. His face was calm, almost peaceful. As the manhunt began, Mitchell studied Evan's past more deeply. His sister's case file was painful to read. Missed follow-ups. Delayed searches. Notes marked low priority after the first few weeks. The system hadn't failed loudly. It had failed quietly, the way it failed so many others. And Evan had been there, answering calls, listening to other people beg for help while his own voice went unheard. The next call came sooner than expected. This time, Evan didn't just give a location. I don't enjoy this, he said. I endure it. Police rushed to the scene, but the body they found wasn't like the others. The victim was alive, barely. Stabbed, but breathing. Paramedics rushed him to the hospital, saving his life by minutes. It was the first time Evan had allowed that. Mitchell understood the message immediately. He wanted to show restraint. He wanted to show control. He wanted them to see the line he believed he had never crossed. Public reaction exploded. Some called it proof that Evan wasn't entirely heartless. Others saw it as manipulation. The department was divided, torn between stopping him and understanding him. Mitchell felt that divide more than anyone. She began to speak directly to Evan during press conferences, careful with her words, measured in tone. You don't have to carry this alone, she said into the cameras. We can still listen. That night, the phone rang again. You're late, Evan said. We're listening now, Mitchell replied. Silence stretched between them. I didn't want to be heard, Evan said finally. I wanted things to change. Mitchell closed her eyes. They won't change like this. They didn't change before, he replied. The next crime scene held the final confirmation Mitchell needed. When police arrived, they found no body. Just a note placed neatly on a bench. Tomorrow, I stop calling. The threat wasn't of more violence. It was of disappearance. Mitchell knew what that meant. Evan was preparing for an ending, either his own or someone else's. She worked through the night, retracing his movements, his patterns, his logic. Evan chose public places tied to his sister's last known movements. He chose times that matched his old shifts. He chose locations that symbolized waiting. The final location came to her just before dawn. An abandoned train yard near the edge of the city. A place where signals crossed and died. A place where calls went unanswered. Police surrounded the area as the sun rose. Inside one of the rusted train cars, they found Evan Cross. He was alone. There was no weapon in his hand. No phone. Just a single stab wound in his chest, identical to the others. The official report would later call it suicide. Mitchell knew better. As officers secured the scene, her phone vibrated. A call came through the non-emergency line. The voice on the other end was calm. Familiar. There's a body in the train yard, it said. You should send someone soon. Mitchell's blood ran cold. Evan was dead, and the call had still been made. That was when the truth finally became impossible to ignore. Evan had not been alone. He had been taught. And somewhere inside the system, someone else was still listening. The city woke to the news the next morning believing the nightmare was over. Headlines announced that Evan Cross, the man identified as the caller, had been found dead in an abandoned train yard. The official statement was careful and brief. The threat had been neutralized. There would be no more calls. No more bodies. The city could finally breathe again. Flowers appeared outside police headquarters. Some were for the victims. Others, disturbingly, were for Evan. Online arguments flared one last time, but even outrage grew tired eventually. People wanted closure, and the story of a broken man who turned into a killer gave them exactly that. Detective Laura Mitchell did not feel relief. She stood alone in the train yard long after the crime scene tape was removed, staring at the rusted railcar where Evan's body had been found. The morning sun revealed details the darkness had hidden. The wound on Evan's chest was precise, clean, perfectly placed, just like the others. If Evan had done this to himself, then he had died the same way he had killed. Calm, controlled, intentional. But that wasn't what haunted Mitchell. What haunted her was the call. Evan's body had been discovered after the phone rang. The call had come from inside the police station. That fact was quietly removed from the official timeline. Mitchell returned to her office and closed the door. She pulled the call logs again, ignoring the ache behind her eyes. The final call had been routed through the non-emergency line, just like all the others. The internal trace showed it originated from a desk terminal in communications, a terminal assigned to an empty seat. The dispatcher who normally worked there had transferred departments 2 weeks earlier. His name was Daniel Rowe. Mitchell pulled his file with shaking hands. He had worked in police communications for nearly a decade. Calm under pressure. Reliable. Trusted. His evaluations read exactly like Evans had. There was one more similarity. Daniel Rowe had been the dispatcher on duty the night Lily Cross disappeared. Mitchell felt the room tilt. She reviewed the call logs from that night. Lily had called for help. She had reported being followed. She had given a location. The call cut out suddenly. The response time had been delayed. Daniel Rowe had taken that call, and he had closed the incident as unresolved. Mitchell sat back slowly, the weight of the truth pressing down on her chest. Evan had not created the system that failed his sister. He had learned it, studied it, trusted it, and when it broke him, someone else had been standing nearby, listening. Daniel Rowe had not just witnessed failure. He had been part of it. Mitchell confronted him that afternoon. He sat across from her in a small interview room, hands folded neatly on the table. He looked tired, but not surprised. When she mentioned Evan's name, his eyes flickered with something unreadable. "I wondered how long it would take," Daniel said quietly. Mitchell kept her voice steady. "You made the last call." Daniel nodded. "Someone had to." "You let Evan believe he was alone," she said. "You let him carry all of it." Daniel leaned back in his chair. He wasn't alone. He just didn't know he was being understood. The room felt unbearably small. Daniel explained slowly, calmly, as if telling a story he had rehearsed many times in his mind. He and Evan had worked the same shifts. They had listened to the same voices in the dark. They had learned the same rules. Stay calm. Follow procedure. Move on. When Lily disappeared, Daniel had been the one who told Evan that sometimes people just vanished. That resources were limited. That not every call could be treated as urgent. "I believed that," Daniel said, "until I heard her voice." He admitted he had kept the recording. He listened to it again and again, long after Evan resigned. He listened as the city forgot Lily's name. When Evan began killing, Daniel recognized the pattern immediately. He understood the timing, the language, the restraint. He knew exactly what Evan was doing and why. "And you helped him," Mitchell said. "I didn't stop him," Daniel corrected. "There's a difference." He had rerouted calls, cleaned logs, covered small technical gaps that would have exposed Evan earlier. He never told Evan directly. He never needed to. They were speaking the same language. Then Evan began to unravel. He was getting tired, Daniel said. He wanted it to end. Daniel admitted he had made the final call after Evan's death. He had stabbed Evan himself, using the same method Evan had used on others. "Why?" Mitchell asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because he wanted silence," Daniel replied. "And because the story needed an ending." Mitchell stood slowly. "You killed him." Daniel nodded. "I released him." The confession was enough to bury Daniel Rowe forever. He was arrested quietly, charged quietly. The department sealed the case quickly, desperate to keep the truth from spilling further into the public. The official story remained unchanged. Evan Cross was the killer. The caller was dead. But Mitchell couldn't forget Daniel's final words as he was led away. "There will always be someone listening," he said. "The question is what they do with what they hear." Months passed. The city healed in the way cities always do. Memorials faded. News cycles moved on. The police department announced new reforms, new training, new promises. Files were reopened. Apologies were issued. Some families found answers. Others found only fresh grief. Mitchell transferred to another division. She stopped working nights. She stopped answering phones unless she had to. But sleep never came easily anymore. Late one evening, as she prepared to leave her office, she noticed something waiting on her desk. A small envelope. No return address. Inside was a printed transcript. A 911 call. The date was recent. The voice on the page was calm. Too calm. Mitchell's hands trembled as she read the final line. "There's someone here. I don't think they want to help." Her phone vibrated. The time read 2:17 a.m. The non-emergency line was ringing. Mitchell stared at the screen, her reflection staring back at her, older and more tired than she remembered. Around her, the station was quiet, almost peaceful. She picked up the phone. The voice on the other end was steady, familiar. "There's a situation you should know about," it said. Mitchell closed her eyes. The city had believed the story was over, but the truth had never stopped listening.